Hello and welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Nelson Liu. Well, Bain is one of the better known candidates in the mayoral election for the City of Perth, emphasising the need for inclusiveness, commitment and accountability. She's pushing a 5-point plan for the city, but will it be enough to convince young ratepayers to support her? In the 6th week of our local government election series, we talked to Di about her vision for Perth.
Bain, welcome to WP.
Thank you for having me, Ivan.
So, after several weeks of campaigning, so much busy time for you, especially when you're attending forums and debates, what have you learned?
I've learned that our community is very unhappy and they're looking for solutions. They're looking for leaders who can deliver and restore trust and transparency and integrity back to council.
There's one little problem that I have identified among all the candidates, that everyone is trumpeting exactly the same thing, almost exactly the same thing. How do you differentiate yourselves from other candidates?
I think it's challenging. I certainly was the first candidate to declare my intentions to run for Lord Mayor and for Council, and so my platform has been out there for quite some time. But I also think it's encouraging that we're all looking and talking about similar things, because it shows that all the candidates have in some way, shape or form their finger on the pulse. So they understand that the community, there's some hot topics in the community. I think what's really important though is our city is made up of two types of ratepayer. There is the businesses and the commercial enterprises, and then there is the residents. And our residents live in neighbourhoods within our city, so they have very distinct issues, and the commercial sector has a similar but slightly different issues. So the way I differentiate myself is by telling the community that about my commercial acumen and my ability, telling the commercial community about my commercial acumen and my ability to understand what it means to be the chair of a board. And for the residential community, I have a demonstrated track record of volunteering in the community, working for free as the chair of Activate Perth, trying to create vibrancy in our community, but also understanding as a business operator in our city what it means to grease the wheels of commerce.
What about young ratepayers? What's your assurance to them, and what are you going to do for them?
Youth are our future. And there's no doubt that there are a lot of students that fit within that age demographic, and it's very exciting to see a new university campus coming to Perth, and that's going to be a real game changer for our city. So in terms of young people, I think we need to make sure they've got affordable housing. I think they need to understand, we need to understand that younger people that don't have families enjoy the nightlife, and we need to accommodate for that and make sure that our city is affordable at night time and offers a diverse mix of nightlife opportunities.
Sandy Ann just put forward the City of Neighbourhood ideas. What about you? How are you going to make the city more livable?
So the City of Neighbourhoods was a concept that was championed by Activate Perth, and in fact after the Perth City Summit in 2017, Activate Perth, which I'm the chair of, went to Eric Lumsden, the Chair Commissioner of the City of Perth, and appealed to him to understand, or for the city to understand, that Perth is made up of very distinct precincts. And the city has implemented in its master plan or its master vision this concept of neighbourhoods. I think what we need to do is ensure that we as elected officials are listening to the diverse needs of those neighbourhoods and making sure that we're understanding the residents that live there need amenity. So they need supermarkets, they need medical centres, they need all the things that a suburban neighbourhood would require.
So you talk about amenities of supermarkets, schools, those are the things that are missing in the CBD, though. You do agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing, I'm in West Perth right now with you, and we're seeing a Woolworths that will be built in the coming year or so. Finally. And we're seeing Coles and maybe a Woolworths in East Perth. So it's a demonstration that the commercial sector has actually realised that there is a residential population that needs to be serviced. And if what we can do is create more inner city neighbourhoods, and when I say more, I mean denser populations in our city and right in the very core of our city, then what we'll start seeing is more opportunity for other businesses to also open up shop.
Now, what about the reports from the papers, which is from the West Australian, on the $100,000 war chest? Now, if you don't mind, I ask you this way: do you see it as unfair smear?
From the West Australian newspaper?
From on that story, the angle of that story.
Yeah, I see it as the West Australian newspaper backing its candidate in to the position of Lord Mayor. And trying to do all they can to discredit whom they think is the front runner and the only person that can potentially knock out their candidate. The $100,000 donations, which was rounded up, was gifts I received from my friends, colleagues and very close networks. So these people were very concerned about the influence of Seven West Media on this city and came to me and said, Di, we want to contribute to your campaign so you can get your message out to as many people as possible. So it enabled me to do 2 registered post mail outs, each of which cost nearly $20,000 in the city.
And you do have a problem with that power as well, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Yes.
But I'll let you finish this.
And then the rest of the money, or the rest of the declaration of gifts, was me being transparent and open and accountable and declaring my in-kind support that I received. So that's how I've been completely transparent, and the reason I've done that is because there are so many people doubting the intentions and the motivations of people running for council. So I want to be the person that's completely open, completely transparent about who's supporting me. And I challenge the other candidates who have sat in forums and publicly declared that they have 0 conflicts of interest, all of them. I challenge them to go and sit a governance course and understand what it means to have a conflict of interest. Even if you own a small building, a small apartment in a building in the city, there is your conflict right there.
Okay, so what's your assurance to young ratepayers?
My assurance is that I'm going to restore trust and integrity back to our council. I'm going to make young people think, wouldn't it be great if I got involved in local government? Because after all, local government technically is the last place for real community input. We don't have political parties in local government. It's meant to be very independent. But what we really do need to do is ensure that we are very professional, that we demonstrate best practice governance, and in my view, best practice governance means diversity around the board table. So a diversity of ideas and opinions is a good thing. Like, we shouldn't be afraid of it. We don't need to run with factions. We don't need to create a culture of us versus them inside our city, because ultimately we all want to go on the same journey. We all want what's best for Perth, but sometimes human nature can get in that way. So what we need is leaders who can demonstrate that they want to all pull in the same direction.
Bain, thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you.
And now the AMA WA's President Dr Andrew Miller provides his weekly COVID-19 update.
Hi, out and about this week, as you can see. Huge week, of course, in coronavirus news with the positive result from the President of the United States and his partner. Hopefully they will both be okay. Very interesting to see the different treatment that you get when you're a president compared to a person on the street. Already been administered the cocktail of antibody treatment, which is one synthetic and one convalescent plasma treatment, which means they've got it from a person who's recovered from coronavirus and injected these into the president in an effort to neutralise virus that might be circulating in his bloodstream. And secondly, they've given him remdesivir, which is a treatment that had shown some early promise which hasn't really followed through in other trials around the world other than an early trial in China. But obviously they're throwing everything they can at it in that this one individual, and it makes you ponder a little bit about how treatment is different in that country for those who have the resources compared to those who don't. And very grateful to be in a system like that in Australia, where we have universal healthcare and everyone will receive high-level treatment, including, of course, the opportunity to access new and novel treatments in the context of clinical trials around the country. So it will be interesting to see not only how the President does, but also how that affects the politics of the way people think about the disease. And it does have an impact even here in Australia, where there are those who are sympathetic to some of the more extreme views of the President, that this virus might just go away one day, and maybe now those people will take it more seriously and see that it can affect anyone at any time. And it's very, very important that we use the controls over our borders, both international and state, in order to keep populations safe until we have the kind of treatments that are actually going to work and be available for everybody, or a vaccination which will work and be safe and be available and delivered to everyone. And in the meantime, if what Western Australia has to suffer through is these phase 4 restrictions, where we even get to see our football team lose like we did last night with a large crowd attending, then that is, compared to the rest of the world, a pretty incredible place to be, where we've seen now, unfortunately, over 1 million deaths around the world, 35 million known cases, as compared to Australia's known cases of 26,000. So in perspective, even if that means we've had 50,000, if there's we double that, if there's conservatively for asymptomatic cases that we just know nothing about, then we still have a huge part of our population, still 26.2 million people who are susceptible to this virus, and that's the reason that border controls are so important. The main attack on border controls is going to become people getting sick of it, and so we need to make it a smart border, a transparent border. It was good news to see some more tech coming into the equation this week, with the Good to Go app now being able to assist with home quarantining of domestic arrivals. Certainly not beyond the bounds of possibility that we'll be able to bring back more and more people who are stuck overseas and quarantine them appropriately, safely, and give the police the tools they need to deal with the idiots who are never going to cooperate because they either just don't believe in the virus, or they're part of criminal enterprise, or for some other reason don't want to follow instructions. So our local situations, we have the ship at Port Hedland, of course, being handled well by the state government's emergency response team. Does throw into question, how all of these places are going to cope if there's community outbreak. Very different game when it's not on ships and when it's out in your community. And if it's happening in multiple places at once. We did have one scare with a ship in Fremantle, which, as I understand, has proven to be a negative test result there. But we're constantly vulnerable. We can't stop the economy completely. We do have to have these kind of interactions, and we do have to get smart about it for the long term. So I think that what we need is a consistent set of standards across the country, something that's open, that's transparent, that people can understand what the rules are, people can appeal if they need to fully get a fair hearing as to why they want to move around the country, combined with high-tech location tracking if we need that, combined with rapid testing, quick testing turnaround, things like sewage surveillance, so we can see if it's in areas where we didn't expect it to be at all, and pick up that there might be clusters in certain places, as they have in New South Wales. And also the constant awareness that we need to improve the PPE that's available for healthcare workers. We saw a health department employee this week just wandering around in front of the people getting off the ship in Port Hedland. Unfortunately, the standard of PPE is still too low. We've seen TGA approval of the high-level elastomeric gas mask type things this week. We've also seen that the Singaporeans have managed to avoid any infections at all in one hospital there, despite treating 750 COVID positive patients using Australian-made high-tech PPE. So really, it's getting boring having to say this to our government, but if you don't protect healthcare workers, you can't protect the community. The standards that were applied in Victoria failed. The committee chair of the infection control experts group still has their job, despite the fact that 3,500 healthcare workers got infected in Victoria. I don't know what it would take for them to sack the chair of ICAG, but it's time they got on with that, revamped the system, gave the nurses, the doctors, the orderlies, the admin staff, the pharmacists, the allied health, everybody else working in hospitals, the proper gear, the kind of gear that you see cleaners using on the TV. So let's get on with it, let's get it organised, and then you can stop me complaining about it. Thanks very much for your time.
And that's all for this week. We'll be back with another episode of WP next time, but until then, it's back to you, Ivan and Sarah.
Thank you, Nelson. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on the website and social media pages.
No matter where you're watching, look after yourselves and we'll see you next Sunday.
Wish you good health and take care.
Good night.